Night Shift Whispers.
During my high school days, it had become a prevailing trend in schools across my city that the orientation for new students had to be accompanied by a tradition of seniority passed down through generations, brimming with resentment. This practice was typically incorporated into the induction camp for new scout members. Yes, the Scouts, an extracurricular activity that supposedly wasn't compulsory for students but was made mandatory specifically for the first-year students. Quite cliché, isn't it? Disguised as an official event from the outside, but you might have guessed that a significant portion of it involved hazing, just as they had experienced from their predecessors. This camp usually spanned 3 days. To escape the obligation of participating, the procedure for avoiding it was just as lengthy as attending the camp itself. There were numerous hurdles to overcome, starting with writing a formal request not to participate, accompanied by a strong and reasonable justification, along with a letter from parents on stamped paper and signatures from various parties. These parties would carefully consider whether the request was worthy, whether the reasons were acceptable or not, and so on. It was a hassle. The process was so convoluted that almost all new students preferred to endure the 3-day camp rather than embarking on an uncertain mission impossible. I detested the formality of the Scout induction camp, but eventually, I too became one of those overwhelmed juniors with no choice but to assemble at a campsite on the outskirts of town, near a forest that I was convinced would be anything but pleasant at night. The concept of the event had been etched into the minds of juniors long before the committee organized it. What could we do? Year after year, based on what we heard from alumni, the concept remained almost the same. It wouldn't stray far from community service, outdoor survival, a night of performing arts and campfires, and the most anticipated event was the Midnight Exploration. Yes, the Midnight Exploration. This is where the seniors had fun assigning challenging tasks to us, and they would spook us with homemade ghosts. It was a blend of April Fool's Day, Halloween, and perfect seniority rituals. The Midnight Exploration, that's the part we were all anticipating the most. From early evening, we were all gathered in the middle of the camp area, but the groups were sent off one by one, starting at 9 p.m. Unfortunately, our group was one of the last to depart. We didn't set out until past 10 p.m. It was almost certain that we would be finishing this event well past midnight. What was interesting about our group was that we had a brave soul named William. Even before the camp event began, he had already devised plans in his head not to succumb easily to the seniors' whims during the Midnight Exploration, and he even intended to prank them back. We were a bit excited. This event would be not only entertaining for the seniors, but for us as well. As we departed from the camp area, we felt as if we had imaginary horns growing on our heads. The route of the Midnight Exploration was marked by arrows on stickers affixed to tree trunks every few meters. At each checkpoint, there were 2 senior members on duty, their posts illuminated by medium-sized candles. At the first checkpoint, the task given to us already seemed like a mild scare tactic. We were asked to name 3 horror movies we had watched and then briefly retell their plots. It was a useless activity, unrelated to wilderness survival skills. But that's how it was. As mentioned earlier, this was just a fun event for the seniors, disguised as a noble scouting program from the outside. At the second checkpoint, we were instructed to share experiences of encountering ghosts, whether they happened to us or those around us. What was this all about? Even if the stories were fictitious, they didn't seem to care. They were simply trying to divert our focus and thoughts into a realm of horror to make us frightened, and they would derive pleasure from our fear. Here's where William started to take action. He described one ghost figure in an exaggerated manner in his story. He even told the seniors, "It's like the one behind you." The two seniors were momentarily surprised and turned to look. Then, with an innocent expression, William added, "Never mind, bosses, I'm an indigo, no worries, you can't see it." We left checkpoint 2 while stifling laughter, satisfyingly pranking the seniors. "I'm sure, in the next checkpoint, some seniors will cosplay as ghosts," William said confidently. "What will you do about that?" someone asked beside him. "Let's pretend to be scared, and I'll pretend to hit one of them reflexively out of surprise. Or we'll startle them by acting as if we see even more ghosts behind them," William replied enthusiastically. It was a great idea, and we all agreed. And indeed, at checkpoint 4, we encountered one of those fake ghosts. A figure clad in all white stood about 10 meters ahead of checkpoint 4. They were wearing a long loose dress that doubled as a head covering, all in a weathered white fabric. Their long disheveled hair dangled from beneath the head covering. We were somewhat spooked as our flashlights pointed at the figure. Their appearance was eerie, much like the ghosts we had seen in horror movies. The upside was that we already knew it was just our senior in disguise. Following William's instructions, we rushed past the figure pretending to be scared and alarmed. Meanwhile, William took the opportunity to lightly touch the ghost's head or do something else spontaneously that would annoy the person behind the ghost costume. "What's going on?" one of the seniors on duty at checkpoint 4 asked, puzzled as they saw us shouting and running toward their post. "There's a ghost, boss," I replied, pretending not to have recovered from the shock. "A ghost?" The senior looked confused. Dressed all in black with a straw hat, they continued their inquiry. "No, boss, they're all in white," William replied. The two seniors in front of us exchanged whispers and looked uncomfortable. For some reason, we were only allowed to proceed to the last checkpoint after being given the task of singing a song. Yes, simply singing a song. On our way from checkpoint 4 to checkpoint 5, William began discussing the white-clad ghost from checkpoint 4. He said that the ghost's hair was extremely elastic, like jelly, and he even tried to touch their head, which was also soft. It was as if there was nothing inside it, just a white fabric shell with no substance. We were busy speculating about how the fake ghost figure was created, appearing solid from the outside but empty on the inside, and with such elastic hair. One of us assumed that it was simply white fabric draped over a pole without a framework. But someone else disagreed, claiming to have seen the figure move as if walking. I, on the other hand, questioned the singer's earlier assumption about the ghost figure. They had mentioned a figure dressed in black with a straw hat. Perhaps that's who should have been there instead of the white-clad one. That's why they seemed puzzled. It was somewhat confusing. What was clear, though, was that when we arrived at checkpoint 5, we were greeted by 5 seniors, 3 in scout uniforms and the other 2 dressed as ghosts. This time, one of the ghosts matched the description from the senior at checkpoint 4, dressed all in black with a straw hat. The other ghost was a regular human who had painted their face like a zombie. William's mischievous nature resurfaced as soon as he saw these fake ghosts. He approached them one by one and tickled their sides. At first, they remained silent, but eventually, their laughter erupted. One of the scout uniformed seniors reprimanded William for what he was doing. William defended himself, saying that there were no rules from checkpoint 1 onwards that prohibited disturbing the ghosts we encountered along the way. He had also bothered the ghost at the previous checkpoint, and the seniors there hadn't been upset about it. As a result of this argument, we ended up being interrogated. The 2 scout uniformed seniors questioned us about the ghost at checkpoint 4 that we had seen. While my friends answered the interrogation, my attention was drawn to the other scout uniformed senior who stood in the darkness behind the 2 seniors questioning us. They were still, unmoving, silent and not approaching us. Curious, I asked the person next to me for their opinion on the senior who was just standing there. My friend playfully directed the flashlight at the figure. We were shocked, almost screaming. The senior had no face. Yes, there were no eyes, eyebrows, nose, mouth, just a flat piece of skin. Our panic was eventually noticed by William. He also aimed his flashlight at the strange figure without a face. Then, boldly, he asked the other two seniors, "Bosses, is the one behind you just a statue?" The two seniors were bewildered by William's question. They turned to look behind them and immediately shouted in surprise. They hurriedly led us to a somewhat distant location. The two fake ghosts, the zombie and the black-clad figure with a straw hat, also approached. They instructed us, in hushed tones, to return to the camp area as quickly as possible without causing a commotion. Meanwhile, the four seniors on duty at Checkpoint 5 would follow up on the situation at Checkpoint 4 and promptly escort those students back without completing the activities at Checkpoint 5. The midnight exploration had gone awry. It turned out that the soft white-clad ghost at Checkpoint 4 and the faceless senior at Checkpoint 5 were not part of the organizing committee. They were real ghosts. As a result of this incident, the midnight exploration was removed from the orientation program for new students at my school. Gradually, other schools in our city also began to eliminate this event from their programs.